Today, I want to explain the ending of the movie by Zalbat Monglij and Brit Marling, titled The Sound of My Voice, with a special focus on where its sequels would have gone and its connection to the later Netflix series, The OA, as it's through that show that we can explain what would have happened next. The Sound of My Voice wasn't just co-written by Brit Marling, but like with The OA, she also stars in it as one of its main characters. In this film, Brit Marling plays a mysterious woman named Maggie who claims to have traveled from the future, from the year 2054. In the present, she is being housed by some dedicated followers who believe that she is truly warning them about the disasters that are about to happen so that they can survive and create a new thriving community. In addition to Maggie, the film also focuses on the characters of Peter and Lorna, a couple that's managed to infiltrate this small cult around this supposed time traveler so they can expose her to the world. They aren't just doing this for fun, of course, as Peter's mother joined a cult when he was young and ended up taking her life as part of a mass death that was meant to spiritually release the congregation. Peter therefore imagines himself as something of a savior figure to these people, coming in to rescue them from someone that has brainwashed them and is leading them towards their death. At first, the goal was just to get into the cult and record Maggie for the world to see, but there are strict rules that stop Peter and Lorna from doing that. To get to Maggie and hear her stories, they have to travel to one location where they have their clothes and items removed before being transferred, blindfolded, to the basement where Maggie holds her meetings. The point of the film, at least in its early parts, is to emphasize how cults do tend to brainwash people and how there is a method to the madness. They first make you work really hard to get information even if it's unnecessary, such as the multiple locations they go to in order to meet Maggie. They rely on a slow build with very little information in their stories over multiple meetings, giving people just enough to keep them hooked and wanting more, even if they're not certain that this person is telling them the truth. These people have the allure of fantasy around them, and lots of people want to believe in fantasy things happening, such as time travelers. So when questioned, leaders often make an example of one of the members so that others don't dare push the envelope by asking questions that are clearly meant to test the leader's story. We see this with Maggie, who throws out a man who first asks her to sing a song from the future, then points out that the song she chose is actually from even deeper in the past. There's also trauma, presented as some sort of trust-building exercise that bonds you to the group, something Maggie does by forcing her followers to puke as a sign of letting go of what's been holding them back. The movie even creates a sort of system of initiation where the characters are slowly taught an intricate secret handshake. As time progresses, our leads who were once new to the group become masters of the handshake, paralleling Peter's growing fascination with Maggie despite their goals to expose her. The climax of the film came with Lorna learning from the police that Maggie is a wanted criminal in the present, who they claim is being hidden just to prevent her arrest while trying to kidnap a child. This child is one of the students at the school Peter works at, and Maggie asks him specifically to bring her this child so that they can talk, but won't explain why. When Lorna talks to the police, they claim that Maggie wants to kidnap a child and sell her into a dark life to keep funding her existence, where she's treated like a messiah by her cult and given all the food and booze and smoke she needs. Peter is convinced to bring this girl for Maggie for a few moments while on a field trip, unaware that his girlfriend Lorna had arranged for the police to get there and arrest Maggie. But when he brings the girl to Maggie, something amazing happens. Once Maggie meets this little girl, the two perform the secret handshake, the one that the initiates learned before meeting Maggie herself. When the little girl asks Maggie how she knows that handshake, she claims that the little girl is the one who taught it to her, or rather that she is the one who will teach it to Maggie. All of this shows the audience that regardless of the criminal life that Maggie may have lived to support herself after time traveling, this little girl is in fact Maggie's mother, and that Maggie just wanted to see her one more time before she was locked away, and whatever would happen next would happen next. Maggie seemed to know that she was about to go away, warning the people and giving them one last test to eat worms, as she claims to them that the future they're about to enter won't have very much food. And she seemed to know that it was part of her cyclical destiny to try and meet her mother, have that one moment with her, and then be arrested, leaving the rest of the cult with the information they need to try and survive the coming catastrophes. This was a great ending, but like many of Zal and Brit's projects, The Sound of My Voice was just meant to be an indie attempt at starting a bigger story, with this one planned to have 3 movies that would have likely escalated in scale with the help of more studio backing. The second film would likely have involved Peter having a now tense relationship with Lorna due to her tricking him into getting Maggie arrested, with Peter now drawn even more into the mystery and wanting to help Maggie get out of prison. The problem with that is that the second film would likely deal with Maggie still not seeming entirely honest about her origins. The reason for this is something already set up in the first film, which is that Maggie doesn't seem to have the best memory of the future, and that makes sense when you understand the story of the OA, which comes later. With The Sound of My Voice never getting its sequels, it makes sense that Zalbat Monglige and Brit Marling would attempt to tell essentially the same story in a different form, sometimes trying to work the same ideas into their other movies that followed, and eventually trying to create the biggest version of their story with the Netflix series The OA. None of Brit Marling and Zalbat Monglige's films ever ended up getting the sequels they wanted, but The OA did end up getting its second season, even if it didn't get the entire 5-season story. And because of that, we get a little bit more information about how other projects like The Sound of My Voice would have continued. Each of the seasons of the OA is modeled after a different part of the careers of these creators, with season 1 being extremely similar to The Sound of My Voice. In season 1 of the OA, Brit Marling's character claims to be a woman who has traveled, but instead of claiming to be a traveler through time, she instead is revealed to be an interdimensional traveler. Like Maggie, OA convinces a group of people to meet her in a room where they all sit on the floor as she tells them this larger-than-life story about her origins and how she got there. Both the OA and The Sound of My Voice have a focus on Marling's character not just narrating a story, but very specifically asking them to focus on her voice in particular and having the characters close their eyes, having them imagine the story so that it becomes more real to them.
It will be impossible for your mind to digest. Maybe close your eyes. Try opening up.
I want you to close your eyes. I want you to imagine everything I tell you as if you're there yourself.
In the OA, we also get a parallel to the secret handshake in the form of 5 secret movements that she teaches to the kids and their teacher that she's telling her story to. In the OA, these 5 movements are explained as having great power, including the ability to help the characters jump into alternate dimensions, but not with their bodies. Instead, in the OA, the consciousness of a person leaves their body in one dimension before entering the body of someone else in an alternate reality, generally the body of someone living the same life as them. It's from this that I think we get a lot of the answers to what really happened to Maggie in The Sound of My Voice, not because she is traveling dimensions too, but because the rules for time travel in The Sound of My Voice are likely very similar to the rules for dimensional travel in the OA. One of the big themes of the OA is that interdimensional travel causes you to lose your memories, as traveling into a new body can make you take on the memories of the host, and some characters completely forget that they jumped from a different reality entirely. In the OA, the characters experience a death when leaving their bodies, and the new body that they jump into also has a near-death experience, with OA jumping into the body of an alternate version of herself in season 2. We see something very similar to all of this in Maggie's story from The Sound of My Voice, where she claims that her time travel led to her waking up face down in a bathtub, as if she had just drowned and had a shock that brought her back to life. Maggie's body appears to have been a woman who was addicted to drugs, with the montage of Maggie's earliest memories in this time being her just wandering the streets and doing drugs with the homeless. Maggie seems to think she time traveled with her body, but after watching the OA, it looks more like Maggie began to rationalize the details on her body to make sense to her, with her choosing to believe that the anchor tattoo she had meant that she was some sort of traveler, and that the number 54 was about the future year she was born in. The idea here isn't that this body is Maggie's, but that Maggie from the future simply left her body behind and traveled into the body of some random stranger, just like they can do in the OA when not entering the alternate version of their own body. Maggie would have understood that she traveled from a different time, but she wouldn't have all of her memories intact, explaining why it's hard for her to prove that she is actually from the future, and having her make up stories for the different parts of the life of this body she's piloting that doesn't actually connect to her. More of Maggie's memories would return over time, which was also common in the OA once your consciousness began to integrate with the new body more healthily. Something that also involved Brit Marling's character going underwater in a bathtub and nearly drowning to retrieve memories of her other life. For me, I think it would have been great to see a sequel to The Sound of My Voice in the not-so-distant future, showing the world beginning to collapse as Peter tries to make amends with Maggie, finding what looks like lies again, only for him to realize she doesn't have all of her memories but is telling the truth. Eventually just setting everything up to be destined to happen the way it already did and keeping these characters in a mysterious loop. The third film could pick up years later with the real Maggie finally being born, explaining the story of how she traveled back in time, likely revealing she was meant to warn them of an even greater disaster that they don't survive. This would make Marling's character one trapped in a loop where she is keeping things entirely the same, not realizing that her goal is to change the future that she came from. This is the story that seems to be projected to happen in the OA, with the O itself in the OA representing how the show is actually one giant loop, and the A representing how the first half of the story story mirrors the second half before returning to where it started. But for more information on that theory, check out our giant hour-and-a-half-long video where we go into what would have happened in seasons 3, 4, and 5, using this kind of symbolism and clues from other movies and shows from Brit Marling and Zalbat Monglige. Don't forget to subscribe, as I'll be doing other videos breaking down their various projects in more detail, and I plan to tackle Brit Marling's other film, Another Earth, next. See you guys then.